Well, I mean, this is all about reciprocity, and if we're talking about Australia's position with Asia, our own sort of sense of identity in relation to Asia, Leslie, do we have as much of a listening for what Asia's telling us, or are we sort of deluding ourselves that we're
on those, you know, keep holding it up with bits and pieces? What we actually have to do is make a decision about our international policy, particularly in the cultural area. Either we take the house down and start again, or we renovate and look at the structures that are existing and make use of those and build around that. But unless we take a much bigger picture of our engagement internationally, and it's not just about each country, it's not just about each region, but as a whole, then we won't actually be making any ground. And we will lose the momentum that is on offer to us at the moment, which is not mathematical, it's exponential. And if we don't exploit it, then in 15 years' time we'll be looking behind us and we'll say, where did we go wrong?
I'll ask one more question before we hand it over to the audience, and this is open to anyone who's prepared to bite, really. It strikes me that the sort of conversation we're having now, which is really trying to move towards some sort of sophisticated response, talking about trying to encourage a sophisticated understanding of our neighbours, of Europe, of modern Asia, modern Europe, modern Australia, is at times at odds with a sort of a market-driven rationalist world where business isn't really, they don't need that sophistication to be able to get, you know, signatures on a contract. What they need is just a bit of good business psychology. Understanding too much about the other person might lead to sort of moral qualms. So, you know, a rational society likes less detail, not more. So are sort of organisations, AsiaLink, university, you know, pursuit of an understanding of another culture, are they at odds with government, with business?
Sorry, if I could just make a couple of comments about that. I think partly it is about mindset, as you say, is that and I'm going to generalise here a lot because, you know, we're talking about, you know, Asia and Europe. You know, I think what's happened in the past is that we have gone into Asia with our Western binary rationalist mindset to do business, whether that's culture business or anything. Yeah, outcome obsessed, you know, outputs, and that's been structured for us, particularly in Australia, because we do have, you know, resources. We do have government resources to do some things, but it's very focused on this sort of, you know, KPI, outcome, project. You all know, you all apply for grants, you know, what are your outcomes, knowing that before you even go, what the outcome. In Asia, and I'm going to generalise, they sort of think, why are you doing it if you already know the outcome? In Asia, you actually have to have the conversation. And even in terms of doing business, you know, you can't just sit down, do the deal, and then go and have a drink after. It's actually about getting to know and to trust and build relationships with other people. And I think that's the leap Australia hasn't really yet made, of understanding that if you want to engage with Asia, you know, forget about, you know, doing it through different vehicles. You have to go in with a very different mindset. And you don't necessarily know the outcome before you go, but you can be absolutely assured that there'll be a whole range of interesting and exciting, you know, outcomes and projects that do develop once you've actually had the conversation. Because from Asian perspective, it's about getting together and seeing actually where it leads you.
And that is something that artists and writers are much more receptive to, because the meandering path is actually the artistic path as well. It's about inquiry along the way.
Exactly.
I would just like to pick up exactly on Leslie's point, and the point which, David, you started off with at the very beginning, the point of process. The question of engagement as a process, I think, is very, very important for all of us in our relationships, and you can take that any way, but particularly in international relationships. You've got to be in the relationship for the long haul. You've got to be engaged in a conversation where you are genuinely interested in listening to what the other side has to say. Now, one of the things as an outsider and as a foreigner and a guest in this wonderful country of Australia, one of the things that strikes you as a foreigner is the great Australian qualities that you are constantly reminding yourselves about. The rugged Australian, independent streak, blunt talking, no nonsense, pragmatic, results oriented. These are wonderful qualities. But I think one of the questions you have to ask yourselves, sometimes these qualities get in the way of listening? Do they ever get in the way of working quietly and patiently with somebody on an outcome? And incidentally, when you apply for EU funds, you'll also have to state your accounts and objectives and so on. But do these qualities sometimes get in the way of working patiently over a longer time horizon than appears warranted from an Australian perspective, in order to get the joint nature of the solution? One of the things in Europe that we learn day in, day out, so much that we almost take it for granted, is that the European Union works on the basis of every day 27 countries sitting down together and nutting out solutions to problems that everybody knows are better solved at the European level rather than the national level, because there's something incomplete about the national level. And nutting out these solutions involves a lot of intensive dialogue, a lot of listening. Everybody knows you don't get everything that you want. And if everybody of 27 countries holds out for absolutely everything that they want on the deal, then there won't be that solution, and we have to come back to it again. The problem doesn't go away. So we are enmeshed in process and dialogue. And sometimes, of course, we pay a certain price for that, because people complain that, well, the financial markets, for example, have looked to Europe to take bigger decisions more quickly, and why couldn't it? But it's because of the way that we work. But this big way of working enables everybody to make progress, everybody to be part of that step forward. That is the result. So these are some of the issues that strike me as a foreigner in this great country of yours, that you have to bear in mind when engaging with partners around the world, and particularly maybe in Asia. I also had the honor to serve many years ago in the Irish Embassy in India for a number of years. And so the Indian time horizon, for example, would be slightly longer than an Australian time horizon if you're trying to get a solution. But if you want a solution with an Indian, then you need to work according to it's obvious.
Do you have any thoughts?
Or plenty, I find that, for example, business and art go hand in hand, actually. If the Renaissance could happen in Florence, that's because they were filthy rich, actually. And having a booming artistic scene in an extremely poor country, I still have to see one. Art and business sometimes are not contraproductive, let's put it that way. Secondly, as far as art, understanding of each other, or at least listening to each other, the lack of doing that is most probably the cause of the biggest tragedies of all centuries, of the 20th and 21st, well, at least of the 20th century. Needless to say that what's happened in the Middle East, part of it, at least, of the situation, is due to a lack of understanding, not necessarily agreeing with another position, but if you don't try to understand at least the other one's point of view, be it culture, be it business, be it politics, you are in for a very interesting time. Sometimes too interesting time. It's really the basic principle of our job, David and me, to try to do that. Last point I'd like to make, with all due respect to David, think you're hard on yourself. That's at least in Europe, Australia has clout, and you are infinitely more popular than you think. I mean, art is not only something...
David personally, or...
No, Australia, no, of course, there is the thought. No, he knows 10,000 times better than anybody else, but art is not only high art, it's also the perception of the artistic scene of Australia. For God's sake, you are a middle-sized country with Nobel Prizes in literature, with extraordinary artists, with fantastic people who made a fortune and made a career in Hollywood. I mean, for a country of 20 million people, it's exceptional, honestly. Name another one. To give you an idea, I mean, Australia is so popular that in my country, the second largest ice cream chain is called The Australian. I don't know if you remember it. It has absolutely nothing to do with Australia. Nothing. Not 1 cent, not 1 centiliter of milk or whatever. Zilch. Zero. But these guys make a fortune just choosing the name The Australian. Well, actually, we like you, you know. I mean, it might come as a surprise, but we definitely do it. And that's something you have to build upon. You have a positive image overseas, and that's something you should cultivate even better. In our job, we are playing with a concept called the public diplomacy. And public diplomacy is also art and so on and so forth. It's something which is extraordinarily attractive. It meaning reaching over to another country, not by the normal canals, the normal channels of inviting Speaker of the House for a drink and so on and so forth, but reaching out to people which are not reached by us, usually, meaning artists and so on. And we use art and we use what we can offer on that one with a view of profiling ourselves on country or business and so on and so forth. It is hugely expensive. And as it's a good idea that everybody seems to have at the same time, it's a bit overcrowded over there. So it's not with, say, sending an orchestra to Democratic Republic of Congo that one is going to profile ourselves. It's through projects like you have, I mean, constant people-to-people contacts, inviting people at your place, and vice versa, doing things together, and sometimes doing things together in another country, is really the good thing. Sorry if I can still have 1 minute of your time. One of the greatest things that happened for me in the European Union, which is something extremely important for us, it's not that much the euro and peace and so on and so forth. It is that, of course. That's basic, and that's obvious. But it's also the fact that for the last, 15 years, 15% of the youth of Europe is spending at least 1 year of their studies in another country. It's called the Erasmus project. So people study whatever they like. It can be history or economics or whatever you like. And you can spend in your 3 or 4 year curriculum 1 year, 2 years in another country. It is, for me, the best thing that happened in Europe and for the European idea, culture, and future that has happened. Should we be able to do something together on that one? And also with Asia. That might be the best thing we can do. Instead of going out with great concepts. I mean, this idea of allowing the new generations not only to have a contact and have a look at the Mahabharata or whatever, but going to India for 6 months, 1 year of study, and exchanging, and doing the same with Indian or whatever students. That, as an experience as a European citizen, this is one of the best things that happened to us in the last 20 years. And that's how we build a true generations of people with a real, alive, and daily concept of Europe. And should we be able to do that with Australia, which, and I'm looking to my colleagues and nevertheless friends next to me, that's something that should be done, not only with Europe, but possibly thinking about making it wider. That would be a fantastic contribution.